most people push back on that because they think, I'm the best performer at my job. I deserve a promotion. So when I look back at what happened to me at IBM, I was the number one performer in my job of the 13 of us, but I was nowhere near the game. I was just working hard, thinking that if I become the best personnel manager, they owe me a job.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of season 5 of the Work Well, Live Well podcast. I am glad you're here. Your feedback has really contributed to the content and our whole approach for this year. Something a client said to me recently has really influenced this season. She said to me just recently, if I'd had this coaching and feedback earlier in my career, it would have changed my career trajectory. Not that she couldn't use it now, but she could see a pattern where had she navigated differently, understood some things differently earlier, it really could have opened up different opportunities. So what we want to do this season is talk about career strategies and life management strategies that you can use to better manage, better navigate, grow your career or business, mentor others in this area, move into more senior or different roles, or just enjoy the life and career you have now even more. So welcome to the season of careers and life management. And you don't want to miss this first conversation. I feel so excited, honored, happy for me and for you that the first episode I talked to Mr. Harvey Coleman. Harvey is a legend and a jewel in the civil rights space and the career space. And the way this came about is I actually recorded an episode on the PI career model, which we get into in this episode. It hadn't been released yet, but in my research for that episode, I learned so much about Harvey, who created the model, and the context behind it and how it came to be that I just really wanted to talk to him directly. So I reached out and he kindly and graciously agreed to join the podcast. So I had a treat talking to him in preparation, and now you're getting to hear from him directly. He is the creator of one of the most leveraged models there is for how to navigate and manage your career in organizations. So in this episode, Mr. Coleman, he shares a bit of his life story, so I'm not going to give too much away, but let me just tell you a few things about his amazing life. Harvey came of age in the separate but equal Jim Crow era. He was arrested twice at sit-ins, had crosses burned at his homes. He was a Mississippi freedom rider. He was there in the crowd for Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech. And after the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, he became the first Black salesman ever hired by Xerox. So he is a civil rights icon, full stop. He also served in the U.S. Army and was named Soldier of the Year during the Berlin Crisis. As a business owner, the Greater Atlanta Chamber of Commerce named him their first ever Small Businessman of the Year. And he also spent 12 years at IBM in sales, executive management, human resources leadership. And as you'll hear in this conversation, we get into a lot of what he learned in his career. Through his own firm, Coleman Management Consultants, he has also advised England's House of Lords. He has trained executives in over 40 C-suites, and he's led seminars for African Americans, Asian Americans, Latinx, and LGBTQ plus leaders and ERGs for over 40 years. He's lectured at the MBA programs at Wharton, Emory, Georgia Tech, Carnegie Mellon. I could go on. And for 22 years, he was the top-rated speaker at the Personnel Management Academy for Executives. And today, you will see why. So you are in the right place today. This episode is for you. Share it with people on your teams, your children, your mentees. It's for anyone who is trying to navigate an organization or a career in today's environment. I'm personally doing a mini book club with a few young people, including my daughter, to talk through the lessons Harvey is going to share in this episode. I've already given them the book. So listen to the episode, get the book, share it with others. There's so much wisdom in this episode and in what he's written down. He really uncovers the unwritten rules of career management. So I am glad you're here. You're in the right place. Welcome to season 5 and enjoy. Well, Mr. Coleman, thank you so much for joining. I am really looking forward to this conversation for a lot of reasons. But I'd shared that one of our focuses for this season of the podcast is careers. And you really can't talk about career management, career development without talking about the books you've written, the pie model you've shared. It's just so core to understanding careers within organizations. So thank you for joining. I'm honored to have this conversation.
Well, I'm honored to be with you. Thank you for the invitation.
Yes, yes. I mean, and one reason I'm excited to have this conversation is, I've seen your model referenced so many times as it relates to careers, but it wasn't until I was preparing for this season that I really understood like more of your story, more of the context, more of the history behind the model, and how you got to these books that you've written. So, and I think that context is so important. It actually made it have a different even meaning for me in understanding how you got to this. So, I'd love to start with just what inspired you to write your first book, which people may be aware of, the Empowering Yourself, the organizational game revealed. Just what led to that and just a little bit of your history as background.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
I guess it can come in two answers. The short answer is that when I was in corporate America with IBM Corporation, I hit a glass ceiling.
Mm.
And I thought at the time it was because of race. It was back in the mid 70s. And I couldn't understand, so I left in frustration. I found out later that it wasn't race that caused the glass ceiling. But the longer answer is, as you mentioned, my life experience. I'm an old dude.
You don't look it.
Well, thank you. I'm 85, and that puts me back into the Jim Crow era. In my small town, and it was a northern town, a little small town right outside of Pittsburgh.
Mm.
We had colored night Thursday. We had to go scaling. Friday was colored day at the community swimming pool. Had to sit in the balcony in the movies, and many of the lunch counters we couldn't sit there. And so I became active. I was arrested twice at sit-ins. I've had three crosses burned on three different homes.
Wow.
Yeah, the first one was interesting. It's kind of a life changing incident for me. I was 6 years old. My parents moved and integrated a white neighborhood, and it was two
Mm.
doors from a big Methodist church. The first night there was a big 6 foot cross burning on the lawn, and I got excited. I ran into the kitchen. I said, "Mom, Dad, the church is welcoming us into the neighborhood."
They were like,
Yeah. Well,
mm,
what happened was my father was standing at the window, and my mother, normally a very calm woman, was hysterical. "Harry,
yeah.
get away from the window. They're going to kill you." And not knowing, I dropped down, was starting to pull at my father's leg to get him away from the window. And boy, I can just
Mm,
visualize it. It was like yesterday, the light flashing on his face. He looked down at me and said, "Harvey, don't you ever allow anyone to keep you from doing what you have the right to do."
mm.
And that helped me out because when I had a family older, I had two more crosses, one in Princeton, New Jersey. Didn't
Wow.
know that I integrated a neighborhood that was 6 miles from the northeastern region of the Ku Klux Klan,
Wow.
and the third one was in Columbia, Maryland. This one wasn't a 6 foot cross. It was just they just burned a cross in the lawn. I kind of felt cheated. I was getting used to the full treatment there.
Right.
They gave me
Yeah.
the half duty treatment, but
Mm,
I was a Mississippi a freedom rider. Uh, and I won't go into a lot of stories, but this one was pretty interesting because I walked away with a major lesson about the game that
mm,
hopefully we'll get into. I had a family. I was in Princeton, and one of the members of my old singing group that I was with called up and said, "Harvey, there's a freedom bus leaving Philadelphia going to Itabena, Mississippi. We got to go on it. We got to be there." And
mm,
well, my youngest daughter is about to be born, and
mm,
I just can't leave. I said, if she comes early, I'll catch a plane to Memphis and drive over to Itabena. And surely, she came, and
mm.
I was holding her in my arms, and I told my wife, I said, I can't leave you two. And she inspired me. She says, you're not going for yourself. You're going for her. Well,
Oh.
I had to get on the plane.
Mm.
I flew into Memphis,
Yeah.
driving across the border. It was about 2 in the morning, pitch dark, no houses, no street lights, nothing. Found out later coming back there was nothing but cotton fields.
Mm.
But sure enough, there was a set of headlights in my rearview mirror, and I slowed down to make sure that I wasn't violating any laws because I was getting very close to where the three college students had just been murdered,
Mm.
and sure enough, the lights went off, the sirens, and they had me spread eagled on the front hood, and there were two of them, and the younger asked the older officer, "Well, what do you think we ought to do?" And the only thing I could think about was at least I held my daughter in my
Mm.
arms this morning,
Wow.
and the older officer says, "Well, I'm tired of these inward college students coming down here telling us what to do." I heard that and I yelled out, "I'm not a college student. I'm with the IBM Corporation and I'm down on business." And it stopped him for a while. He walked over to me and he said, you don't dress like a college student, because I had my IBM uniform on, my white shirt and suit and all of that. And IBM at the time had just become the largest corporation in the world, and I guess they didn't want to mess with that situation.
Yeah.
But they let me go with, you better choose your business territories a little more wisely.
Mm.
But I thought and digested the fact that, he mentioned that you don't look like a college student. And
Mhm.
at that point, I said, your image, your dress really matters. And in this
Mm.
case, it might have saved my life.
Saved your life.
But
Mm.
I was at Dr. Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech in Washington. Had the privilege of training Andy Young's staff when he was mayor of Atlanta, and probably the most gracious honor I had. I was one of 7 people that was in the first 2 planning sessions for Coretta Scott King when she was planning the King Center. And in my career, I had an opportunity to be a consultant to England's House of Lords,
Mm.
and with all of those lords and ladies, and none of them could even come close to compare with the regalness of Coretta Scott King.
Mm.
But as far as jobs were concerned, prior to 1963, that's all you had was jobs. There were no careers.
Yeah.
And I probably had every service job in where I worked on garbage trucks, I shined shoes, I picked fruits and vegetables on farms. I was a dishwasher. I worked at the car wash.
Okay. Yeah.
but but uh, but 1964 happened,
Mhm.
and it was the first time we were allowed as a race into the game. And I quickly applied to Xerox Corporation as a sales rep. And I was the first a sales rep that they had hired. But in those days, selling was pretty tough. I would go into lobbies, and sometimes I wouldn't be allowed
Wow.
to make a presentation. 4 or 5 times I had made the sale, and before I got back to the office manager had called my branch manager saying, "Look, we like your machine and we'll take it, but we don't want that N-word." That in
Wow.
those days, the N-word was just casual.
Mhm.
Uh, as our sales rep, and Xerox stepped up to the line. They said, "Look, Harvey comes with the machine. You don't take Harvey, you don't get the machine." So,
Wow.
so had that reinforcement by a major corporation. 3 years later, I went to IBM Corporation, and this is just to show the attitude that we had to deal with back in the 50s and the 60s. Uh, they because I was with Xerox, they asked me to write the first Black awareness program that was
Mm.
existed in corporation, and because I had authored it, they wanted me to be the presenter at all of the ex-Confederate states, Mississippi,
Wow.
Alabama, and their plan was read the new civil rights law, read IBM's new policy, which in essence told these southern locations, be ready because you're going to have some black folks sitting beside you in your office very shortly. And many of the locations, they still had white fountains, colored fountains, and white bathrooms. So it was a major shock. But they gave every location 1 hour to vent. They could say anything they wanted to.
Mm.
Without any repercussions. But they said the moment you walk out the door and you violate the new policy, you will be instantly discharged. But that 1 hour of venting, I called myself a spear catcher. Questions like, does your blackness rub off on your sheets when you sleep at night?
Mm.
They also, 4 or 5 times, is it true that, and the N-word was almost preferenced every sentence. Do you N-word males have little tails?
Mm.
And so you could see that well, it was ignorance because of lack of contact.
Yeah.
That our nation had between the races at that time. But my career started to advance very rapidly with IBM, and in 7 years I was at a job where there were one of the regions. There were 13 regions. I was in those days it was called personnel managers, not HR managers. Yeah. But I was one of the 13. There were no women, and I was the only person of color. The first year in that job, I ended up about 5 or 6 in the ranking. They had 5 major categories that they were judging all of us by. They promoted the top 2 people, and I thought that was fair. They had outperformed me. They were veterans, and they said they deserved it. Second year, though, I hit it out of the park. I was the #1 performer in all 5 categories.
Okay.
And I said, well, this is my time. I started moving boxes into the office. And I was discreet because I would hide them in the corner.
But you knew it was coming, right?
Hey, I'm #1. But they promoted the second and third individuals in the ranking. Went into my boss and he told me, well, we expect sustained performance. And I said, well, that could be okay. They wanted to know was this just a lucky year for me? Was it a fluke? I worked harder than I've ever worked in my life in that job. And I started to move well ahead of #2. But again, they promoted the second and the third individuals in the ranking. Back into my boss's office, and I know no one's ever heard this one, the old be patient speech, your time's coming, be patient. I was patient for 6 months when they promoted a person in Dallas, Texas region around me that used to call me up. He had only been in the job for 6 months, and he would call me up at least once, twice a week asking me, Harvey, how do you do this? Can you help me through this? I was training him, and for some reason, IBM promoted him around me. And at that point, I said, I think I've gone as far as I can right now with that company, because obviously they're not promoting me because I'm the best performer. Right. They're performing me because, you got to be white. And then, of course, I couldn't meet that criteria, so I left. Interestingly, and this is how I started to think about the rules of pi. There were 2 white women who IBM asked to write the first women's consulting firm, women's awareness course in the country. And they moved to Manhattan, and because there were so many calls around with major corporations, shared practices that were asking, what are you doing with women? And they said, this is a business. But it was during the periods of rioting, and they would go in major corporations and they would say, look, we'd like to listen to your message about women, but blacks are burning down our cities. We need some help. So they brought me up to form their minority consulting division. So I had access to a lot of C-suite executives, chairmen and presidents, and every opportunity I had, I would ask in a one-on-one situation, how did you do it? how did
Mm.
you get to your C-suite? And I really was trying back in my old company, IBM, and I couldn't do it. And that's when they would always tell me, Harvey, you got to work hard. You got to keep your nose to the grindstone. And
Yes.
I was thinking, wait, I couldn't work any harder than I
Yeah.
worked that last year at IBM. I said, that's not the secret.
Mhm.
But those were the days of the 2 martini lunches and the four martini after work gatherings. And when that second martini clicked in, they would
Mm.
relax and they would tell me some war stories. Well, Bill, if I was talking to the president, Bill, the chairman, he and I were college roommates, or
Mhm.
Carl and I, he was best man at my wedding, or
Mhm.
Jim and I, we were fraternity brothers. And they never connected those
Mhm.
relationships as to why they were in the positions they were in. Because they did work hard, they were good, and they just assumed, they made it on their total merit.
Yeah.
But the light bulb then went off, and I said, wait a minute. There is something that's a little deeper than just working hard in this game. And that's when I discovered and was inspired to really dig in. I left that. Oh, just to again test the or share the relationship that our nation had as it relates to women.
Mhm.
uh, and when I was with that consulting firm, I was one of I was the only male with 32 women for a while until I hired some men on my staff. But
Mhm.
we had a 20-minute segment on 60 Minutes because no one could believe that why would any corporation train a woman to be a manager, because we
Mm.
all know that women would never be able to manage men. So it was just a waste of
Wow.
time and money. Interestingly, those two organizations I worked with, Xerox and IBM, they both ended up having women as CEOs. Xerox,
My, how things
African
have
American
changed.
CEO.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can see how far we have come
Mhm.
from where we were. But
Mhm.
I started my firm 56 years ago with the sole purpose of trying to figure out how this system works.
Mhm.
And that really was my inspiration. Boy, that's a long answer, though.
No, that is a perfect answer, actually. And, you
That's how
know,
I started thinking about what I call now the game.
yeah, no, that's a perfect answer. And I love that context. And thank you for your service and your commitment to civil rights. I mean, when you were telling the story of your wife saying, no, you have to go for her, I was just, yeah, that's amazing. And you went for her, you went for me, you went for all of us, really, because we wouldn't be where we were if you hadn't, and others with you hadn't
Yeah.
put your life on the line. I mean, and it's hard sometimes, I think, for my generation and those especially younger to really have a feeling and understanding for how dangerous the work was. But so thank you for sharing that story because that's the context I really didn't have on how you'd come to this until I started the research. But that just puts it in a whole new light for me. And I really appreciate the service and commitment you had to betterment for everyone.
Well, as we all know, I had a lot of help because
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
a lot of
Thank God. Yeah.
yeah.
And I love how you called it the game. I think that's really interesting, like how you reference the organizational navigation as the game. Um, and it would be great to just hear what are some key elements that you learned about the game. So, what are some key rules of the game that if people want to advance and just what you learned, what are some key things they need to know?
I guess first to realize that it is a game. If you go to the dictionary's definition as to what a game is, it says a game is something that has to be competitive,
Mm-hmm.
or you have to have a contest or a struggle, and of course we all have those struggles, and the competition part of it, uh, the game is played on a pyramid, and the higher you move up, there's less opportunities, there's less positions, and usually there's more seniority, people with more experience, and so we always say at the top they play hardball.
Mm-hmm.
Hardball doesn't mean they're mean and evil and backstabbing each other. Hardball means that they pretty much have dedicated their lives to, I want to be up there at the top. And so
Yeah.
it gets very tough at the top. Uh, in the definition of game, it says you have to have a set of rules. And that's where we go wrong, because the rules are there. If we, if our society didn't have rules, we'd have anarchy, we'd have
Mm.
chaos. And so there are rules, but the rules are never written down.
Mm.
Each organization has their manager's manual, their employee manual, but no one basically even talks about these unwritten rules, other than saying, Harvey, you got to play the game. But they never tell you what game.
What's the game? Exactly. What is the game?
I'll
Right.
play it if you tell me what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so I figured, and this is probably the most important. In the definition of game, it says you must give every participant a choice of moves
Mm.
to maximize their wins. And I got the title of the first book, Empowering Yourself, because if you think about it, everybody is where they are because of the choices they have made. Their choices, not the system's choices. How far do I want to go with my education? What discipline do I want to study? What organizations do I even want to apply for? And so all of those were our individual choices that gets us to where we are. The scary part of this game is that from this moment to the rest of our careers, we will end up according to the choices that we make. So therefore, we are in a game just by the definition. Uh,
Mm.
one of the cardinal rules in the game is if you play on a pyramid, who's ever at the top of any pyramid has the right to make the rules.
Mm.
Parents in a household,
Yeah.
teachers in a classroom, the principal in the school, the Pope in the Catholic Church. It's a cardinal rule that you can't duck or dodge.
Mm.
I always give the example that if you remember when you were 15, you were going out the door and your parents said, "Now I want you back in this house by 10 o'clock."
Yes.
I mean it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Things happened out there. You found yourself walking up to the front stairs at 12:30. Well, as you were reaching for the doorknob, you were thinking, in about 5 minutes, I'm going to die.
Exactly. This is it. This is
Well,
it.
if you're going to die, you might as well have a strategy. And if that strategy was opening the door and say, "Mom, Dad, listen up. I decided tonight I'm old enough to know what I'm doing. So from now on, I will be telling you what time I'll be." Well, yeah.
Good luck.
Well, one of the unwritten rules, and
Yeah.
most people have heard this in their lifetime, Harvey, as long as you live under my roof
Yeah.
in this house,
Uh-huh.
and that's the only thing a parent is doing is executing one of the unwritten rules of our society.
Mm.
We are, as parents, on top of the family pyramid. We have the right to make the rules.
Yeah.
And so that's very important. If you examine, okay, this system, this game, where did it come from? It's 800 years old.
Mm.
If you go back in history and think about the British Empire, we used to say the sun never sat on the British Empire. And we were, as Americans, one of her colonies.
Mm-hmm.
England had the right to make the rules. That's why this broadcast is being performed in English.
Mm-hmm.
England says the world's going to speak English. Amazing fact that China, about 15 years ago, made a decree that every Chinese child from the third grade to the rest of their formal education must take a minimum of one English class every year.
Mm.
China will soon be the largest English speaking nation in the world.
Wow.
Another interesting fact is that you cannot graduate from the three major universities in China until you take golf lessons.
Mm.
They are preparing their entire nation to play this game, because the rules of the game is not just your one organization, not just our nation, but the
Mm-hmm.
entire global economy now plays by the rules that England set forth. Another great example would be if you go to the top of the pyramid of any nation and you want to socialize, you should be prepared to play golf. And golf is 600 years old, the
Mm-hmm.
British Empire.
Yeah.
They're probably going to get an invitation to play tennis. Wimbledon, 420 years old, the British Empire. She is an island, and so therefore that invitation to do some yachting, some sailing
Yeah.
is forthcoming. And the ultimate is anything on the horse. They
Mm.
call it the sport of kings. We call it
Mm-hmm.
the horsey set. Play polo, fox hunt, just to breed and race horses becomes activities of the elite of every country in the world.
Mm.
And so I started to take a look at what are the major things then I need to start to to learn myself and then maybe share because I started out teaching a lot of ERG classes,
Mm-hmm.
women minority classes, and it was number one, the game is about people and everything else is detail. Everything
Mm.
you think about, you were raised by people, you were taught by people, you were hired by people. Every promotion you have, a person has to be involved. If you're an entrepreneur, your customers are people. If you're a manager, you have to have people to get your job done. So anything other than a major concentration on people is taking a detour from the basics of this game. And the other, of course, is change, because the system is 800 years old and it's going to be around, I think, for another 1,000 years. So if
Mm.
we're going to change the rules of the system, unless China comes across as the major dominant factor, but she's already teaching her folks golf
Yeah.
in English, so therefore the rules still won't change. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's now taking a look at within yourself and say, how flexible am I to match my life to the rules that
Mm.
are not going to change in my lifetime? And that's when I came up with PI. And PI is P for performance. And if you're an entrepreneur, it's product.
Mm.
The I is for the image that you have. And the image that is required is not the image of the job that you're in, because you've already have that job.
Mm.
You're being paid for that job. The image you must change into is the image that is required for the next higher level. And we've heard those. By the way, everybody knows almost all of these rules. I mean, how many people have not heard dress for the job that you want, not for the job you're in?
Mm-hmm.
But it's much more expansive than just your dress. It's your entire lifestyle, and sometimes even your values must change. I remember the time I was a first year salesman with IBM Corporation, and the district manager uh, had a welcome to the organization dinner for like 25 new sales reps.
Mm.
And one of the questions in the question answering session was, uh, Mr. Jones, what does a district manager do? And he said, wait a minute. He pulled out his calendar and he read 3 weeks of his schedule. It just so happened the 2 weekends between the 3 weeks, he was not able to get home. But he had told us at the beginning he had 11 children. And the
Mm.
question, how could you be away from your family for 3 weeks at a time? And he said something to stun the entire audience. He said, many years ago, I made the decision that my career had priority over my family. And we were just shocked.
Yeah.
How could anybody say something like that? And he knew he had lost us. And all he said was, I wish I could come back and talk to each and every one of you 10 years from now. Because 10 years from now, many of you will not be getting home to have dinner with your family because you're going to be working on a special project at work. Many of you are going to have traveling positions. You're going to be calling back home any given night from all over the world sometimes saying, how's everything going on with the family? And said, you won't believe this, but many of you will gather the family in the den one day and say, hey, pack up, we're moving, under the protest. But what about my baseball team? What about my cheerleading? Wait, look, you'll find another baseball team, but I've got to move because of my job. He said, most of you will be doing in 10 years exactly what I'm doing. But he said, most people don't admit when they do it that they're putting their career a little, and you don't forget about your family, but your career sometimes takes priority over the wishes of your family. And so the image that you have to develop is the image of where you want to eventually end your career. Because what I found out is that there are 7 different levels. Shakespeare said the world is a stage and we are mere players. Now, who am I to correct Shakespeare? Of course. But what he left out is, no, the world has 7 stages. And each one of those stages, their socioeconomic levels, each of them has their own dress code. Each of them have their own language, their own value system. And if you want a job as a lower junior executive and you're now in a lower professional job, eventually, if you get that job, you're going to have to interface with those junior executives. And you're going to have to interface with the customers of those junior executives. So if indeed you are not preparing yourself to be comfortable with that junior executive language, then you are no longer a candidate for that job. Yeah, you might be doing a great job, but you're not going to be doing that job once you get a promotion. I always say that if I'm the best widget tightener in the company, nobody can tighten a widget like Harvey Coleman. And I get promoted to manager of the widget department, I will never tighten another widget in my life. And so therefore, being a great widget tightener is not the criteria for the next job. So what is the criteria? Well, it is for someone to see that you might have the potential to be effective at the next level. Now, how do you do that if I'm a widget tightener? Well, someone's noticing at the staff meeting, I'm talking about in 3 months, we might need 3 more widget tighteners. Hey, that's strategic thinking, just like we expect from managers. They see me coaching the new widget tighteners coming in. Hey, that's what we expect of the manager of the widget department. And, gee, Harvey's even starting to dress like the managers around here. At that point, someone, and this is why the exposure part, that is why it is 60%, because what I found out is the P is only 10% of your success. Why? Because the moment you get promoted, you're never going to do it again. The I is 30% because you have to develop the image that is necessary for that next level. And the E, exposure, is 60% of your success. And that is because the only way you can move from, let's say, a level 3 position which is a working class position, to a professional level 4 position, is to be pulled up by someone above you. You must have a sponsor. And a sponsor now has to put their personal reputation on the line, because everybody knows who sponsors who. Okay. Well, Arlene, she's connected with Bill, vice president. So Bill cannot afford his reputation to move you into that higher position until you are ready, because you could be an embarrassment. It's like the Beverly Hills. It's an extreme example. The Beverly Hillbillies, they were the wealthiest people in Beverly, but they were calling the swimming pool the cement pond. They were serving possum for dinner, And so a sponsor cannot sponsor you until they see you and become comfortable with the fact that, if I move Harvey, he won't embarrass me. I see him at the cocktail party or the promotion party, and he moves kind of comfortably as he talks to other executives. And that is the power of executives. Now, a lot of people think that, gee, all I have to do is show up at that promotion party or that retirement party and shake the hands of an executive and see I can check off the exposure checklist. No, see, what they need to know is, can they trust you? Okay. Can they see that you might be equally loyal to the executive culture as you are to your racial culture or your gender culture? And if that trust is not, or that bond of trust is not developed, and it will never be developed just going to a cocktail party and shaking the hands and introducing yourself to an executive, then you're your possibility of being sponsored by that person starts to be diminished very, very quickly. So,
Mm.
that is why most people push back on that, because they think, I'm the best performer at my job. I deserve a promotion. So when I look back at what happened to me at IBM, I was the number one performer in my job of the 13 of us, but I was nowhere near the game. I was just working hard, thinking that if I become the best personnel manager, they owe me a job.
Mm-hmm.
The only contract that anyone has with their organization as it relates to performance is, if you work 2 weeks, you will get a paycheck. If you cash that paycheck,
Yeah,
you are telling the organization, we're even. You
we're
have,
good.
you have
Wow.
paid me for everything I've contributed in the last 2 weeks, and I agree because I cashed the paycheck. I didn't come in and say, no, take this check back, give me another
Oh.
100. So as a matter of fact, 20 years, you work in that job for 20 years, you will be getting merit increases, end of the year bonuses, and they will be greater than your peers, your average peers. So 20 years from now, if I work 2 weeks, it is fair for any boss to approach me with the question, well, what have you done for me lately?
Mm.
Because we have paid you and meritoriously for everything you have contributed. We're even as it relates to performance. And never once is there a contract, just because you do this job, you will be eligible for the next higher job.
Mm. Oh, Mr. Cole, that is so, you know what it is, I think. So thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of times people just don't like the rules.
Oh,
It's
oh,
like because you're saying, as you say, it's like, yeah, we've heard some of these rules before. I don't know if we've all heard them the way you describe them. I think it's so insightful, but you've heard some of these rules before, like dress for the job you want, like you mentioned, and you have to build trust with those around you. But I do feel like a lot of us just don't like the rules. We want the rules to be based on performance, and that dislike of maybe how the game actually works keeps us out of the game.
yeah. And you know why we push back? It's that other thing I mentioned. It forces us to change.
Mm,
It forces us out of our comfort zone. Many young people in my ERG classes said, I want to be my authentic self.
hmm.
Well, what does that mean? Well, authentic self to me says, I don't want to change. I've discovered who I am, so let
Yeah.
me be who I am, and don't make me change, because it'll take me out of my authentic self. My favorite quotation on change was from Will Rogers. He was an old humorist back in the day. He made the statement, "In this world that is changing so rapidly, when you're through changing, then you are through."
Mm,
And it is because if I define myself as I was in my college days, and here
yeah.
I am 30 years old, uh, I can't be competitive. How can
Mm,
I be competitive? Because I'm still back in an era that doesn't exist anymore. And
Mhm.
if I want to be in the C-suite, then I got to learn what C-suite people do.
Mhm.
I've got to learn the language, even the values. Just to give you an example of values, level 3 working class, level 7, which is the board of directors class. Uh, Level 3 working class people say, those people up there in the board, they send their children to boarding and prep school, and I demand my family at 6 o'clock have dinner together as a family. How could they do that to their children?
Mhm.
Well, it's a change in values. Uh, Level 7 people say of level 3, I send my children to boarding and prep school to prepare them to the mission of making a difference, changing the world, freeing the world of AIDS and or hunger or water. And those people in level 3, all they think about is this little small group called the family. They can't even see the big
Mm.
picture.
Yeah.
And that's a change in core values.
Mhm.
But if you want to be up to even more dramatic, level 6 and 7, the billionaires are sixes.
Okay.
It's not about money. The
Mhm.
billionaires are the high tech people and the AI people that are making the big pharma people are making these billions. Level 7 is old money. They're in the foundations. They have hundreds of millions of dollars,
Yeah.
but they control the rules of the system, not the money people.
Mhm.
Bill Gates, at one time the wealthiest person in the world at the time, applied to Augusta National, one of the most elite uh, uh, organizations, and he was refused membership.
Wow.
It was not until he gave his 50% of his wealth away that he was
Mhm.
echoed into, because level 7 people don't want to sit around the table listening to how you got market share, and they want to know, well, what are you going to do to make a difference? The Carnegie Library, the Mellon
Mm.
Museum. And if you're not in that frame of mind, that value system, they don't want to be around you. They have enough money for 2 more generations, so they don't care
Yeah.
about money. And so uh, a lot of times we think that, uh, what's the Facebook guy, Mark
Zuckerberg. Mhm.
Zuckerberg. He was famous for his gray shirt. Just I mean, he was on Time magazine, cover of Time magazine, gray shirt. But Congress started to investigate his company for being a monopoly, and guess how he showed up in Congress? Blue shirt, white shirt, blue suit,
Yeah.
power tie, because he
Uh-huh.
knew if he walked into Congress
Mm.
and disrespected that power organization. That
Yeah.
organization had the power to tear his company apart. And
Mm.
so even though he could buy and sell everyone in that auditorium,
Yeah.
he knew that he did not have the power. He had the money, but this system is not run by money, by wealth.
Mm.
So a very interesting aspect of the game.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to keep going on.
No, I think the part of the resistance could be the resistance to change is really interesting, and just our willingness to adapt to whatever the rules are of that particular level of the organization or level of socioeconomic status you want to get to. Like a willingness to adapt, I think is an interesting way of thinking about it. And I know one of the things you said in your book that I thought was so interesting is that even not making a choice in the game is still a move. It's still a choice. Like even when you don't make a choice, that actually is a choice.
It's a choice. It's a choice.
Yeah. So I think if we're choosing not to adapt, that's a choice in the game. And of course, that choice is going to have consequences. So I think this thinking of it as willingness to adapt may help people understand it better, understand the choices they have more.
Mm.
Um, and I know in one of your books too, I love this. I think you were trying to help us get there with this book, this
Yeah,
idea that a lot of people resist, and what are things that might help people that are resisting the rules of the game to think about it differently, to have a different mindset, to kind of move into be willing to adapt to whatever the rules are of that particular game. So Maybe just before our kind of closing thought, say something about the resistance part that you've seen and what you'd recommend people think about if they can feel that internal just resistance to the rules of the game.
Yeah. Well, it's probably one of the biggest barriers that we have, because the loyalty that we have to our culture. I know as African Americans, we were forced to be together because we couldn't play in the mainstream game. So we knew that we had to bond together and be strong as a unit. And that's why, the African American church became the core unit of us bonding together. But we knew that we had no choice when the game opened, and that was our struggle. Let us in the game, let us play. But for those of the individuals who started to leave the nest and fly away, uh, we labeled them as sellouts, Uncle Toms. Why are you becoming more loyal to this mainstream game than you are to our race and the struggle that we had, or we are undertaking? And so culture becomes one of the key elements of the game. I discovered that there are 6 steps that one has to go through in order to reach the mainstream. See, as an immigration nation, all ethnic groups, all racial groups, I call them physical reservations. We forced Native Americans to be physically located in one section. We forced African Americans. You couldn't join or buy a house out in suburban America, and so we were forced into the physical reservation. That's step one. Step two is when our children now leave that community and go to a mainstream school. Busing allowed that mixture. Now, some of the culture of that organization is dropped off in the mainstream schools. Some of the mainstream value systems are brought home by the students. Mom, you can't say that anymore.
Yes.
The third is when you get a job in a mainstream organization and you now have to work beside, gee, he's Irish, he's Jewish, he's gay, what have you, and you get comfortable with other culture and people of other cultures. The 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 fourth is when you make enough money and you buy that house in suburban America, and you say, well, I've mainstreamed because you look our neighborhood. There's a Korean family here. This family over here is from India. White family, and one other black family down the street. We say I've mainstreamed. No, if I come to your house Saturday night and you have a party and the only ones that are there are black folks or Jewish folks, or I call the largest mental, you're still on a mental reservation. Still are, when you relax and you want to be yourself, I've got to be around my people. And it could be gay, lesbian, it could be Jewish, it could be African American, but it says that you're still not really comfortable in the mainstream because you don't have a representation of mainstream America at your party. Yeah. Level 5 is when I come to your party and there is that represent. Now, level 6 is now, because it's about culture, and every one of those 7 levels becomes a culture. It is, how now are you learning to become comfortable with that next higher culture or that third high? Because I want to be in the C-suite. Well, I better start learning right now what they do, how to be comfortable with those individuals. And so culture is one. I divide in that latest book, The Difficult and Challenging Journey to Mainstream America. I divide culture into 2 phases: the fads and the core culture. The fads are something that every generation comes up new. I used to have an afro here because I wanted to shock them. You have to cut the ties with your parents, so you change your hairstyle. Some of the basketball players' hairstyles, I don't understand, but they have to do it. They have to say, we're different. We're going to set a new tone. Even language, back in my day, the word rap, he's used it. And now chairman said, well, we're going to have a rap session. It's incorporated.
Uh-huh.
And then, things like, that's the bomb. And hey, I haven't seen you in a minute.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to catch up with what's the change that's going. So those are the fads, the clothing styles and what have you. The core culture is the value system that if you're African American, work hard, always respect your elders and authority. If you get knocked down, get up and keep on. And one of the rules, treat other people the way you want to be. And that rule is golden.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the same rules that every organization wants you to have. And so if you define yourself as fads and fashion, what is the latest thing that is in, the higher you move or want to move up in the organization, the less they accept fads and fashions, because their organ and value system has been around for decades and decades, maybe hundreds of years. So therefore, they're not looking for people with fad that are into fads. They want people who have those core values of your culture. And so understanding where you want to go becomes important, and then beginning to prepare yourself to be competitive for those jobs later. When you now become competitive for that position, there's going to be 10 other people who are all good at what they do at their current level. But
Mm-hmm.
now, how competitive are you with showing that you have the potential of fitting in better than those other 9 folks at that level that you're trying to compete with? And
Mm.
so it says you have to change. You can't play this game effectively. You can be effective at your current level, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're not willing to change, more than likely that's where you're going to be in 10 years, 20 years from now at your current level. And why? Well, I wasn't willing to adapt to rules that you and I are never going to change. Again, 800 years is a long
Yeah.
time. And when other countries are playing by the rules, I always tell people, if you want to see how global these rules are, I had mentioned that golf and tennis. If you watch the U.S. Open in golf, the U.S. Open in tennis, you know, it's hard for us to even be competitive anymore, because
Mm-hmm.
every country in the world are sending great tennis players and great golfers to these tournaments, which means, wow, this is global, isn't it? And so
Mm-hmm.
we're not going to change that. Now, what we can change is ourselves, because just becoming comfortable. Women, I have a picture in my office of a picture of women playing golf, because a lot of times in the women classes that I conduct, they say, why is these men, golf, that's a man's game. Well, the reason why we call people carrying golf clubs caddies is Queen Elizabeth I coined the term. She used her cadets to carry the bag.
Mm.
There's never been a golf course constructed ever anywhere in the world that doesn't have the facilities, the ladies' tees, for women to play golf.
Yeah.
Most Americans might not realize that a woman introduced golf into our country. The first exclusive golf club in the United States was in Westchester County, New York, and it was for women only. And
Really?
if you watch the LPG, the women's golf tour, 99% of men wish they could play golf like those women. And
Yeah.
so it's just
The
that
mindset.
mental reservation that says, no, I'm not going to. Even football, who would ever guess that a woman was going to be a referee in the Super Bowl? As a matter of fact, as a Vanderbilt, a woman got in and she was a field goal kicker and scored the first points in football history. It's just that
Mm.
I remember in basketball in high school, women were not allowed to run past the half line,
Mm-hmm.
because there were 6 people, 3 on this side, and they thought women's heart couldn't take running the full court.
Wow.
So the point being is, is that we can go as far as we want to, as long as we don't stay on our mental reservation and define ourselves in one time, one place, because the game is available to anyone who wants to play it. And we've seen so many, in my case, African Americans. Well, we've had a president, we've had a woman vice president, we've had senators. We can no longer say that the game. One last point.
Yeah.
I go in my classes. I say, look, have you ever even tried opera? Oh, I don't want to hear that old man, white man's music. I said, well, have you ever heard of Paul Robeson? Paul Robeson, probably one of the greatest voices, probably did as much work in helping us to the mainstream as Martin Luther King. How about Marian Anderson, who stood in the Lincoln Center, Leontyne Price, Jesse North? I said, if you deny our impact that we have made in opera, you're denying our history. In the ballet, Arthur, the Alvin Ailey, and the list goes on of the great Mr. Copeland, one of the greatest dancers, recognized dancers in the country. I said that, I took a poll 2 years ago. This was only 2 years, and if I can read this, because this is so extensive. Well, what about leadership? It's always the white man's rules. I said, well, 2 years ago, either a woman, a person of color, or an LGBTQ plus person was in Joe Biden's cabinet. We controlled, because who's ever at the top of any pyramid makes the rules. We controlled the rules in the Secretary of Defense, Secretary of Commerce, Finance, the budget, Secretary of Education, Trade, the Intelligence, Healthcare, Housing, Human Services, Energy, the Environment, African American, the Interior, Native American, Transportation, Gay. We were the voice, a Black woman, UN, voice to the world, our UN representative, Vice President. Of the 9 Supreme Court justices, 4 women, 2 African Americans, 1 Hispanic American. There were only 5 white males of insignificant positions, and so we're still mentally thinking that we're not in control, but we can be in control to the degree that we play by the rules of this game, and so many people are doing just that. And the question, well, don't we have an obligation to give back? I always relate to Deb Harlan, who was Secretary of, she started out as a Native American on her reservation, physically. She said she was a community activist, and her major goal was to make sure that the rights of Native Americans were protected. Well, she stepped out of her physical reservation. She got elected to Congress, and in President Biden, she became Secretary of the Interior. Can you imagine? She could have stayed on her Native American reservation, but now as Secretary of the Interior, can you imagine what she can give back to her major concerns? The key is you can give back on a daily basis, but if you play the mainstream game, you now become many times in a position that you could make a tremendous difference. So the point being is the game is out there. We now have to decide, and it's a choice. It's and there's nothing wrong with remaining in whatever community you have, because every community needs Little Italy. Italy needs people to support the Italian community. The same with African American, and there's absolutely no negative with that. You could make a valuable input, but you also can make a valuable input by joining the mainstream and playing by the rules of the game. But it's the choice. It's a choice that every individual. It's not a group choice. Every individual must decide how much do I want to bite off. Women, people of color, people with different sexual orientation, uh, they can stay within themselves, stay within their community, but there's too many people achieving
Yeah.
those high off for us to say, oh well, we can't do it. Our society won't allow. No, that that rationale has long been destroyed by the many successful women. The many, as I mentioned, my two old companies both had women as CEOs. So
Yeah.
how can you say that, gee, a woman can't be a CEO?
Yeah. Yeah. You can.
Of
Yeah, you
course.
can. Welcome to Anelra. Have you ever thought about unlocking the full potential of yourself or the leaders in your organization? Imagine the impact of executive coaching. Ready to transform your leadership impact? Visit us at www.anelratalent.com. Anelra, coaching solutions that work. Well, let me ask you this. I know we're almost out of time. Just a closing thought. If it was one thing you could share with a young person kind of starting their first level, maybe career job tomorrow, what would you want them to know as they enter this game in organizations? Like, what would you want them to know or to be thinking about?
Well, first of all, you have to concentrate on your performance. When I say
Hmm.
10%, I don't mean that you only have to show up Mondays now.
Yeah. Wouldn't that
you,
be nice?
you have because that is your livelihood. That is
Hmm.
your revenue source. So you've got to work hard. But as you do that, always be strategic, looking as to, but where do I want to end up? Where do I want to move my career? And to that, my major, I guess, piece of advice is never, ever, ever, ever stop learning things,
Mm.
because because I tell when I speak to MBA graduates, I said, the moment you get your degree and you leave here, the learning has just begun. Because
Hmm.
a lot of people get that degree and then they float for like 10 years thinking, well, I graduated from Wharton or from Harvard. No, no, no. You've got to. I, I just some. If I've got, I don't know how much time we have, but some quick example is that the first major experience I had with exposure was in IBM. You had to. It was locked in cement. You had to sell for 6 years before you got your first administrative position. Your next.
Okay.
It was 6 years, no exception. I was skiing. I was trying to learn the game. I was skiing in Aspen, and we had a whiteout at the top of the mountain. And I looked over, and the chairman of the board, Tom Watson Jr., was sitting over. I told my friends, "There's my chairman." He said, "Well, go talk to him." I said, "No, are you crazy?" Well, after we were locked in, so after a couple hot buttered rums, and I got the courage to walk over. And I walked over. I said, "Mr. Watson, I work for IBM, a salesman in Philadelphia. I just wanted to come say hi." He said, "Sit down, sit down." We had a 45-minute talk. And in 3 months, I was in my third year as a sales. In 3 months, I was promoted.
Mm.
Now, everybody around me said, "Oh, well, it's because of affirmative action. It's because black." I said, "No, it was
Yeah.
because I met my chairman at his location, and he said, sure to himself, I'm sure he checked with his A, find out if this guy is doing his job.
Yeah.
And at that point, he was with me in Aspen. He can't be too far off the mark.
Yeah.
I was on a plane, and we gentleman beside me, businessman, we were closing our laptops. He said, "Oh, boy, I hope we don't, run into any problems. I have a show I have to go to, a Broadway show." And I just love Broadway shows. My granddaughter told me I've seen, because I was flying up to New York all the time. I've seen 340 Broadway
Wow.
shows, musicals, and so we had this great musical talk. By the time we taxied up to the gate, he says, "Do you play tennis?" I said, "Yeah, I do." He says, "Can you play tomorrow?" I said, "We've had a group of 8 people. One of the people have just left. We're looking for another person." In 6 months, he was on the board of the State Museum board of museum board, and he asked me to join the board. And I've
Mhm.
been on the board for 9 years now. I was at an Urban League dinner, and I'm old enough. I one of the things I did with my children, because I moved to a place where it was number one school, public school in Georgia, and I wanted them to be around the salt of the earth.
Mm,
But
yeah.
when I started to realize that the power of boarding and prep schools, the institutions that level 6 and 7 have made to educate their children, because they're traveling all over the place, that I said, how about going to a private school? What about my baseball team? And uh, I said, okay, what do I took away their allowances. I said, the only way you can make money is if you watch a PBS special in its entirety, you get $5. If you go to a Broadway show, $10. Go to a ballet, 15. A
Yeah.
symphony, what? And I said, opera, $30.
Yeah.
and, and I did that for 5 years. So as a result of that, I started to
Mm.
get very comfortable with the ballet, and I was at an urban league dinner, and the financial director of the Atlanta Ballet was sitting beside me. And we had this great ballet, this because I'm old enough. I'd watched Brezhnev and Nureyev and all the big dancers. And at the table, he said, "We want you on our board."
Mm.
I was playing bridge, and the consul general of England was at my table. There's 5 questions at any cocktail party. Be ready for. You live around here? Where'd you go to school? What's your job? What do you do? And at that point, they're mentally putting you on one of those levels. And everybody
Mhm.
does it. They don't know what they're doing, but
Yeah.
you can know exactly how to gear your conversation by the responses. And and so he asked me, "What do you do?" And at the time, I was doing sensitivity and awareness training back in those days, and he said, we could use you over here in England." And I became a consultant to England's House of Lords. I was at the symphony, and the second year I had those season tickets. A guy behind me said, not being directly, but he said, "Aren't you the family that was up there last year?" I said, "Yeah. What do you do?" And he was from Georgia Power. He said, "Well, we're looking for a company to help us out there." And within 30 days, Georgia Power, Mississippi Power, Alabama Power, and Louisiana Power was my new accounts. I
Wow.
played a golf tournament, and ex-Senator Sam Nunn was sitting beside in my cart, and he asked me, "What do you do?" And at the end of me describing the rules of the game, he said, "You ever do any work for Coca-Cola?" I said, "Senator, I've never been able to crack Coca-Cola." That Monday, the executive vice president of Coca-Cola called me up because he was on the board.
Yeah.
Somebody told me I need to talk to you. Coca-Cola became my account. And not one of them asked me, "Can you do your job? Are you good?"
Mm.
They only related to the fact that this guy speaks the language. He's
Mm.
comfortable. He's eligible for sponsorship. And
Yeah.
so I tell young folks, first of all, decide what you want. And that'll change. That'll change.
Mhm.
You keep saying, I want that. No, I don't. Yeah. But the moment you decide you want it, because you're going to be meeting some very dedicated people, decide what you want, and then just keep learning. Right now, I'm 85. I'm taking 3 languages lessons.
Mm.
I just the last 4 years I'm taking piano lessons. Why? Because the knowledge is out there, but the
Mhm.
knowledge doesn't help if it's out there. The
Yeah.
knowledge has to be within every individual, and people will see that. They will translate that to potential, and you
Mhm.
will never be promoted because of your performance. You will be promoted because some sponsor will see that you have potential, and I can bring you to that next higher level.
Mm.
So keep learning, keep learning.
Keep learning. Yes, and it goes back to one of the things you said when we started, that it's all about the people. And all else is details, like those relationships that you were able to make and the connections because you had done the learning and you were comfortable in the setting and could carry the conversation. How that just opened up so many opportunities is amazing, actually. And I think that's what you reveal in your books is like the unwritten rules of the game. So if you want to play the game, I just want to personally thank you for writing it down because I think a lot of it is unwritten and you can look at it outside in and not fully understand it. But I just thank you for writing it down because I think this really unlocks power and choice for a lot of people. So
Yeah,
thank you so much.
and it just one quick last story.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's never too late. I know maybe someone in the audience, well, I'm 50, and
Mm,
Pablo Casal, the great cellist, was giving at 94 years old, was giving
mm,
a concert in the Kennedy Center, and he agreed for an interview. And one of the questions by the critics was, Maestro, we understand you still practice 4 hours every day. Is that true? He said, yes, it is. The follow-up question, why would you do that? First of all, everyone knows you're the greatest virtuoso that has ever touched the instrument. No debate there. And you're 94 years old. Why would you practice 4 hours every day? And his answer was, I do it because I think I'm making some progress.
mm.
Isn't that great? Isn't that
Amazing.
great?
Oh my gosh, that's
So
amazing.
the game is never over.
It's never over.
Just stay with it.
Stay with it. Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for joining. For those in the audience, we're going to put all of Mr. Coleman's information in the show notes, how you can access his books and also how you can contact him if you'd like to talk to him about coming in to talk to your leaders, your employees, your ERGs, your students. I know one of the things you say in your book as well is that if everyone knows the rules, it's good for everyone. It's good for employees because they have choice. And it's great for organizations because now you have more people capable, ready, able to navigate. So yeah, this is just good for everyone. Honestly, if you're in the game, you want to know these rules and you want your people to know these rules.
I to say, I think you cannot play any game competitively if you don't know
Yeah.
the rules of the game. And
Hmm.
Ronald Reagan had on his Oval Office desk said, without competition, you cannot have excellence.
Mm,
So when you level the playing field for everyone,
yeah.
talent talent will start to rise above, and competition is good. It just makes everybody better. And
Yeah.
uh, and by 2060, only 20% of our workforce is going to be white males. So 80% of all positions are going to be available and open. And so it's we're getting to an era where everybody has a shot at it if
Mm.
you make the choice that you want it, and make the choice to pay the dues to learn the language.
To learn the language if you make the choice. That is a perfect way to end. Thank you so much for joining, Mr. Coleman. I'm so glad we had a chance to meet and have this conversation. I consider it an honor. This has been a gem. I really appreciate it. And thank you all so much to the audience. Thank you all for joining and be well. Thanks for listening to the Work Well, Live Well podcast. If you're ready to grow as a leader or as an organization, head to enelratalent.com. That's ENELRA talent.com to learn how we can support you. Like what you heard? Follow or review the show so you don't miss what's next.